All right. So I figured I'm here. I'm going to do this part two to my story. Um, since it's fresh in my mind, I just want to talk about it. So in the previous video, I kind of talked about what led me kind of in this direction. And like most of the people that do this work, it usually results from some kind of trauma that kind of gives them that, brings them to their awakening, if you will. Um, so I talked about what led me up to this point. At this point, I still was not thinking I'm going to be a medium. I had this experience where I saw my sister, and let me explain that. Through all the years of reading about mediumship, watching mediums on TV, I don't remember any of them talking about how they actually experienced mediumship or communication with spirit. For me, I thought people or mediums saw spirit with their eyes, heard with their ears, their physical senses. When I had my experience with my sister, it was in my mind. And basically, what happened, I was up early getting ready for work. It was 5 o'clock in the morning. Nobody else was up. And I was just in the kitchen. And all of a sudden, I felt like that feeling where somebody walks in the room. I turned around, nobody was there. And I was like, that was odd. I go back to doing what I'm doing. And I feel this again. This time in my mind, I see an image of my sister standing behind me. And I was like, what the hell? But at the same time, I was feeling the energy of somebody in the room. In my mind, I see her walk up behind me, and she puts her arms around me and puts her head on my shoulder. And I'm sitting there just dumbfounded, going, what is happening? And it lasted maybe 30 seconds, and then everything just dissipated, which left me like wondering what the heck did I just experience? That was my first experience with the paranormal, or a visit, if you will, that I could vividly remember. After this, I started looking for a psychic, because my sister's untimely death at the hands of somebody else was unsolved, and this was 2 months later after the event. Long story short, again, it led me to this website. I was working out. I was watching YouTube about this medium channeling this mother's son, and I remember seeing a website link in the bottom. Went to this website. I saw that this group of psychics worked with unsolved cases. I reached out. I simply asked if somebody could point me in the right direction. I'm looking for somebody to help with this case. Two ladies reached out to me, and they started helping me. They started working with me, really not asking anything for themselves, which I was very appreciative of. So over time, I got to know these two ladies, and I still hadn't talked about that experience I had with my sister with anybody to this point. And one day I was on a Skype call with one of the ladies, Linda. And as we're talking, I remember hearing this voice in my head say, "Tell her it's Jim." And I was like, where the heck did that come from? And I ignored it. We continued the conversation. I hear it again in my ear. It's in my mind. I hear, "Tell her it's Jim." Again, I ignored it. Third time, I feel, I don't know if he said it, if I felt it, but I heard it again. "It's Jim. I passed the cancer." And finally, I was like, "Linda, I don't know what's going on, but I'm hearing this voice in my mind. And this man is telling me to tell you it's Jim. I passed the cancer." And she says, "That's my father." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And she's like, "Well, you're a medium." And I was like, "No, I'm not." And we had this conversation or argument, debate for a few minutes, and finally I caved in. I was like, "Okay, maybe." Long story short, she goes, "Hey, why don't you take this development course? I know this teacher. Why don't you just take this course? Just see what happens." And after a few minutes of arguing, I said, "Okay." So I reached out and I took this development course. Within this course, it was a basic intuition course, okay? Each week we would learn about different clairs. The first week, I believe, was clairvoyance. Now, this is where the light really came on because, again, in my mind, I thought mediums saw, experience those that have crossed over with their physical senses. So, with the intuition class with the clairvoyance, the first lesson was explaining how it works for a majority of people. And you see things in your mind. And I was like, what do you mean? And she said, like, picture a flower in your mind. Can you see a picture in your mind of a flower? I was like, yes. That's the third eye. That's how most mediums experience clairvoyance. Spirit will come in. How they do this? No idea. But they will trigger these images in your mind to where you see what they're trying to show you. So again, that's just a brief example of how clairvoyance works. You see things in your mind's eye. So I could see this flower, and that's how spirit works with me when they're trying to show. They will show me these scenes. Sometimes it's a still image. Sometimes it's a movie, if you will. So again, learned about that. The next week was clairaudience. My point with all this is the light bulb went on, and I learned that everything for me was internal in my mind. And that just blew the doors open because now I could go back and I could understand experiences that I've had throughout my life, not realizing what it was. And we all have these abilities. And I'll talk more about that some other time. But again, I started moving forward more with a curiosity. Again, being a medium was not something I was pursuing. It was just like, wow, this is interesting. One thing led to another. I took another course, and it just, with my friend at that time, who was my friend now, Mimi, who taught these courses, I started working with her. And one thing led to another, and that's a long story of how I got out there, with my work. And I'll talk about that too, right? All these teasers about me and how I got out there. But I was very reluctant. But again, I kept reflecting on how much comfort these messages gave me when I was not only going through my kidney failure, but understanding, loss, and just everything that goes with that. And just thinking, in my mind, there has to be more than just this physical world. And it slowly just pushed me towards, being out there. And this is 10 years now. So I've been doing this work for, September will be right around the 10-year mark. So again, I just wanted to touch a little bit about, what got me out there. And I'm going to talk more about my experience. Because I want to share with people. I want to share what I've learned. I want to share the research that I've done over the 10 years. My main thing of being here on TikTok is not only to do readings for people, but to educate and share my experiences, because I know there's other people out there that have questions. They don't know where to turn. In the beginning, it's a very isolating journey. And I learned that once you find your people that are doing this as well or having these experiences, it just makes it so much easier because you have others to fall back on. So again, I know this was long. I hope somebody gets something out of this. And you'll be seeing more of me. Whether that's a good thing or bad, we'll see. So again, all right, thanks for joining me, and we'll see you around.